Meghan is livid. Harry has met someone who is his age, with whom he is in love, and who is in love with him.
There is a woman in Lady Colin Campbell's account, a woman whose name hasn't been officially confirmed, whose face hasn't been plastered across every front page, and who, according to one of the most well-connected royal authors alive, Harry is deeply, genuinely, madly in love with. And allegedly, she is in love with him right back. And Meghan found out, not through whispers, not through a royal aide pulling her aside for a quiet word. According to Lady C, the woman who wrote the book on Diana, the Queen Mother, and the Sussexes themselves, Meghan reportedly discovered the truth the most modern way imaginable. She found the texts on Harry's phone. Let that sink in for a moment. Now, before we go any further, you need to understand exactly who is making these claims, because this isn't some anonymous blogger hiding behind a username. This is Lady Colin Campbell, royal biographer, socialite, author of 7 unauthorized books on the British royal family. She has sources that go back decades, connections that stretch from Buckingham Palace to Beverly Hills, and she chose the Dan Wootton Uncensored podcast to drop what many are already calling the most significant royal revelation in years. And crucially, she said those 4 words that the British press takes very seriously. You cannot sue me. So stay with me, because what happened, who this woman reportedly is, what Meghan allegedly did next, and what all of this means for the future of one of the most scrutinized marriages in modern history. It's all coming, and none of it is what you'd expect. Let's begin with Lady C herself, because context matters enormously here. Lady Colin Campbell has spent decades doing what very few people dare to do. She tells royal stories that the palace would rather keep buried. Her 1992 biography of Princess Diana hit the New York Times bestseller list. She's written about Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. She authored a book specifically dissecting the relationship between Harry and Meghan, called Meghan and Harry, The Real Story. She knows these circles intimately. She understands the legal risks better than most. She chooses her words like a chess grandmaster, every phrase placed deliberately, every caveat inserted for a reason, every pause calibrated to tell you something even when she isn't technically saying it. She has been sued. She has been threatened. She has survived the kind of attacks that would silence most commentators permanently, and she keeps talking. So when Lady C sits down on a podcast and says, "I'm going to tell you something, and for legal reasons I'm going to word it very carefully," you don't roll your eyes. You lean forward. Because that careful wording tells you something in itself. It tells you that what she's about to say has enough substance that she feels the need to protect herself legally before she even opens her mouth. And what she said was this: Harry has met someone his own age, someone who is in love with him, and someone with whom, according to her sources she described as having connections at the United States government level, he is in love right back. She paused. She added the legal disclaimers. She reminded listeners that she used the word "if" for a reason, and that she had deliberately refrained from using the word "affair." But she also said everything else that surrounds an affair, painted the entire portrait without naming the canvas. And then she smiled and suggested someone should probably get a bottle of champagne to calm everyone down. That's Lady C. Precise, deliberate, and absolutely devastating. But here's what makes this even more interesting. She didn't stop there. When journalist Maureen Callahan pressed her further in a follow-up conversation, the picture got sharper. The mystery woman, according to what Lady C's sources have indicated, is not someone on the margins of Harry's life. She is described as being in and around the Montecito environment, which means, as Callahan pointed out, she is probably a woman of money, a woman of some power, someone who understands discretion because she lives in the same rarefied world, not a random encounter. Someone from Harry's actual orbit. And Callahan added the detail that stopped the room. We don't know how long this has been going on. That single observation changes the entire timeline of everything you've been watching unfold publicly over the past 12 months. Because if this is not a recent development, if this connection predates the solo trips and the separate schedules and the growing distance visible to the public eye, then everything you've been observing starts to look different. The pieces rearrange themselves. The pattern sharpens into something more coherent and more uncomfortable. Now here is where this story gets genuinely complicated, and where you, watching this right now, need to ask yourself a question. Does any of this actually surprise you? Think about the past 12 months. Think about what you've seen publicly, not tabloid speculation, not anonymous sources, but what's been right there in front of everyone's eyes. Meghan at Paris Fashion Week, relaxing in the back of a car with her feet up, filming herself as the city lights rolled past outside the window. Except observers pointed out that the route she was traveling appeared to pass near the tunnel in the Pont de l'Alma, the location where Princess Diana died. Harry has spoken publicly, repeatedly, and with enormous emotional weight about his mother's death. He has said that stories involving cars, photographers, and Parisian nights continue to haunt him. And there was his wife, filming her shoes in the back of a chauffeured car, going past that same area, posting it to Instagram like a travel diary moment. Her team later said she hadn't realized where she was. Let's ask the question directly. Do you believe that? Does that explanation satisfy you? Or does it feel like something doesn't quite add up? Drop your answer in the comments, because I genuinely want to know where you stand. Because what happened next is what really fueled the online conversation. Not just the clip itself, but the reaction, the wave of royal commentators, the ordinary viewers, the people who have watched Harry talk about his mother for years, all of them asking the same question. How? How do you not know? And it wasn't an isolated moment. That's what's important to understand. Over the past year, Harry and Meghan have been building increasingly separate public lives, not the kind of separation you'd expect from two people with busy schedules who happen to have different professional commitments on any given Tuesday. The kind of separation that leaves a pattern, the kind that, once you see it, you cannot unsee. Meghan traveled to Geneva for a solo appearance. She went to Chicago on her own. She attended a museum gala without Harry. She walked a red carpet alone. She showed up at a children's hospital fundraiser, a charity pledge dinner, a tribute event honoring Tyler Perry, all without her husband by her side. One tabloid even reported that Harry and Meghan had not been seen together publicly for more than 40 days. 40 days. Meanwhile, Harry has been making separate trips back to the United Kingdom, multiple visits, all without Meghan, all without the children. He's been spending time in Britain, a country he once described as unsafe for his family, a country he left with enormous public drama, and now he keeps going back, alone, and reportedly looking noticeably lighter in spirit each time he does. So here's another question worth sitting with. When two people who once told the world they were inseparable start building such visibly separate lives, what does that actually tell you? And does the timing of Harry's increasingly frequent returns to Britain, something that's had observers watching closely, now look different in the light of what Lady C is claiming? Let's talk about who this woman reportedly is, because the details Lady C revealed, carefully, legally, with deliberate vagueness, are actually quite telling in themselves. She said the woman lives in or around the Montecito environment, not necessarily Montecito itself, Lady C was careful to note, but in the surrounding area. For those who may not know, Montecito is the exclusive enclave in California, where Harry and Meghan have made their home. It is a community of extraordinary wealth, of old money and new money and celebrity money, where privacy is purchased alongside the real estate, and discretion is considered a form of social currency. The woman, according to Lady C's sources, is Harry's age. She is appropriate in every sense, financially secure, well-connected, someone who understands the world that Harry now occupies. Someone who, as one commentator put it, would know what it means to move in circles of power and money and fame without being consumed by them. Someone very unlike the media spotlight that has defined Harry's life for the past decade. Now, and I want to be clear about this, there is no confirmed name. Lady C has deliberately not named anyone. She is aware of the legal implications. She said the word "if" more than once for good reason. But what she described, piece by piece, is specific enough to paint a picture even without a name attached to it. And what the internet did with that picture is something else entirely. The online reaction to this story is actually one of the most revealing parts of the whole episode, because when most relationship scandals hit social media, the response is shock, or outrage, or fierce division. People take sides, they defend or they attack. That's not what happened here. What happened here was something much more telling. When this story broke across social media and comment sections, the dominant reaction was not shock. It was not outrage. The most common reaction, the response that racked up thousands of likes and got shared and quoted and laughed over, was two words: saw it coming. One widely shared comment asked who would even want to get involved with Harry, adding that the commenter wasn't sure even Meghan seemed all that interested anymore. Another joked that if Harry were the last man standing, they'd still pass. People responded with memes, with sarcasm, with the particular kind of dry humor that the British internet does better than anyone. But beneath that humor was something that cut deeper, because the laughter wasn't really about Harry. It was about the years of watching, the years of seeing something being presented one way while sensing it was another way entirely, and finally feeling like the curtain was being pulled back. The public perception of this marriage has shifted dramatically, not just among critics, not just among the people who never liked Meghan or never forgave Harry for leaving, even among people who were genuinely rooting for them. There has been a slow, quiet, sobering shift in recent months. What do you think caused it? Was it the separate schedules, the solo appearances, the Paris incident, or does it go back further than any of that? Tell me in the comments, because this conversation is exactly the kind that deserves more than one perspective. Now here is something that doesn't get discussed enough when people talk about Harry's current situation. It requires going back, all the way back to Chelsea Davy. Chelsea was Harry's most significant relationship before Meghan. They dated on and off for the better part of 7 years, making it one of the longest and most meaningful romances of his life. She was raised in Zimbabwe. She was described by those who knew them as laid back, unimpressed by royal formality, someone who made Harry laugh and let him breathe in a way that the palace atmosphere rarely allowed. She didn't want the spotlight. She didn't seek it. And that, according to Harry's own account in his court testimony, is part of what the relentless media attention destroyed. He spoke, during his legal cases against British tabloids, about how the intrusive coverage of their relationship created a level of suspicion and paranoia that he couldn't manage. He talked about a tracking device allegedly found on her car. He described private arguments becoming newspaper headlines. He used the word nightmare. He lost Chelsea, in part, because of the world he was born into. Then came Cressida Bonus, another relationship where, by many accounts, the intensity of royal life made ordinary love impossible. And then came Meghan, and Harry walked away from royal life entirely. The irony, or perhaps the tragedy, is that in leaving royal life, he and Meghan signed the Netflix deal. They gave the Oprah interview. They launched the documentary series. They built individual social media presences and separate brands and parallel careers that kept them, in different ways, just as visible as they had ever been. He traded one kind of scrutiny for another, and now, if Lady C's sources are correct, history may be repeating itself in a way that would have seemed almost too dramatic to be real if it appeared in a television drama. There's a line that one commentator used in discussing all of this that has stayed in the conversation for days. She said that Harry is his father's son, and that perhaps, living in a gilded cage in California, he now understands something about King Charles that he never allowed himself to understand before. What it means to be trapped in a marriage that has run its course, and what it means to find warmth in a connection that the world hasn't yet seen. That is a striking parallel. It's one that Lady C herself raised, choosing those words carefully, knowing exactly what weight they carry. Charles and Diana. The parallel is uncomfortable. It is one that Harry would likely reject completely. But the commentators who raised it are pointing to something real, that patterns in families have a way of persisting across generations even when everyone involved is determined to break them. Harry once stood on the steps of a chapel and told the world he had chosen differently. He stepped back from royal duties. He relocated his family. He tried to build something entirely new. But is something new actually what he built? Or did he simply relocate the same fundamental tension between the life someone is supposed to live and the life they actually want to a different postcode? Let's also be clear about something that Lady C was very deliberate in acknowledging. She has not said there is a confirmed affair. She has not named a specific individual. She is working with sources. Sources she described as having US government connections, which is itself an extraordinary thing to say on a public podcast. But sources are not proof, and reported claims are not confirmed facts. The Sussexes have not responded. The palace has not responded. No one who knows Harry personally has stepped forward to either confirm or deny anything. That silence may mean many things. It may mean there is nothing to confirm, or it may mean that confirming or denying would create its own set of problems. What it definitely means is that we are in the realm of reported allegations and public speculation. And that's important to say plainly, because the people this story involves are real people, including, critically, a woman whose identity Lady C has very deliberately kept out of the conversation. Dragging an uninvolved individual into internet speculation based on nothing more than timing and proximity would be deeply unfair, and it's not something worth doing. Lady C herself seems to understand that distinction. But the conversation that has opened up around all of this, that is very much worth having, because what's really at stake here isn't the gossip. It's the bigger picture. It's the question of what has actually happened to Harry. People who have followed him for decades talk about a before and after. Before, the laughing, charismatic, slightly reckless prince who was arguably the most universally beloved member of the modern royal family. A man who buried his mother at 15 years old and still somehow managed to carry warmth and humor through decades of public life. A soldier, an Invictus Games founder, a man who genuinely connected with veterans around the world in ways that moved people to tears. After, a man who seems, and this is the perception, not a clinical diagnosis, more guarded, more serious, quieter in his presence even when the cameras are rolling. One commentator described him as looking desperately lonely in California. Another said that he now appears weighed down in a way that the Harry of 15 years ago would have been unrecognizable. His own public statements have reinforced that perception in unexpected ways. When he wrote last year that Britain will always be the country he proudly served, royal watchers read those words over and over, because proud service doesn't sound like someone who happily walked away. It sounds like someone who misses something deeply and is choosing particular words to manage how much of that feeling they're allowed to show. So let's bring this full circle, because every thread we've pulled leads back to the same central question. What happens next? Lady C has made her claims on a public platform. She's calculated the legal exposure and decided the story is worth telling, carefully. The internet has had the reaction it has had, not shock, but a knowing, slightly weary recognition. Meghan has continued her independent public appearances and her lifestyle brand and her Netflix projects without any visible acknowledgement that anything is wrong. Harry has continued traveling back to Britain alone, and somewhere in or around Montecito, California, according to Lady C's sources, there is a woman who is Harry's age, who understands his world, and who, if the claims are even partially accurate, represents something that Harry hasn't had in a very long time, a connection that exists entirely outside the performance. Now you tell me, after everything laid out here, the separate lives, the Paris incident, the pattern of solo appearances, Chelsea Davy, and what Harry himself said about losing her, the parallel to his father's story, does the picture Lady C is painting feel like a shocking revelation to you? Or does it feel like the end of a sentence that's been building for 2 years? Comment below. Seriously, I read them. And this particular story is one that people are interpreting in wildly different ways, depending on what they've chosen to pay attention to. And I want to know which camp you fall into. If you're watching this and thinking Lady C is simply a gossip merchant with an agenda, that's a fair position. She's a controversial figure, and her claims have not been independently verified. If you're watching this and thinking she's the only person in the media willing to say the quiet part out loud, that's also a position with considerable support right now. Where you land probably says a lot about how much of the past 2 years of Sussex coverage you've been watching. One final thought, and it's not about Harry, or Meghan, or Lady C, or a woman in Montecito whose name we don't know. It's about what this entire story reflects back at us, about the way we consume royal narratives, the way we invest in them, and the particular way this one has slowly changed shape over the years without anyone being able to identify exactly when the turning point arrived. The reason this story spread so fast isn't because people are cruel, or because they enjoy watching relationships fall apart, or even because they had some personal stake in being proved right. It spread fast because it connected to something people had already been processing quietly for a long time. A slow accumulation of public moments that didn't quite add up, a growing gap between the official version and what was visible to anyone paying attention. A sense, not certainty, just a sense that the story being presented wasn't quite the whole story. Lady C's claims did something specific in that environment. They didn't shock people, they clarified people. And that clarification hit harder than a shock would have, because it meant that months or years of private observation had been pointing somewhere real, or at least somewhere plausible. And for many people watching, that difference barely mattered. At some point, and none of us can pinpoint exactly when, the public narrative around Harry and Meghan shifted from a love story to something more complicated. Not because people stopped caring, but because people started watching more carefully. And what they saw, slowly, over time, was a couple whose public lives appeared to be moving in different directions even while the official story remained one of unity and purpose. Here is the thing about Harry that gets lost sometimes in the noise of the debate. He is a man who has spent his entire life in one form of captivity or another. Born royal, he had no say in the terms of his public existence. He lost his mother violently and publicly, at an age when most children are still learning to navigate school friendships. He served in war zones, partly because it was the one context in his life where the cameras weren't following his every move. He fell in love with Chelsea Davy and watched that relationship buckle under scrutiny that neither of them chose. He fell in love again and again, until eventually he met a woman who seemed to want what he wanted, a life that was theirs on their own terms. And yet, here we are. The terms they chose are being examined just as scrupulously as the royal life they left. The palace they escaped has been replaced by a different kind of palace. The content machine, the brand, the Netflix deal, the Instagram presence. The cameras didn't stop following him. They just got reframed as content. So yes, maybe that's why, when Lady C's claims started circulating, the response was what it was. Not outrage, not disbelief, a quiet, somewhat sad recognition that the escape Harry thought he was making may have been, in the end, a detour, and that somewhere in the hills of Montecito, a man who once stood on the world stage and declared he had found his person is now navigating, privately and carefully, the question of whether that is still true. Lady C's claims, verified or not, landed on ground that had already been prepared by years of observed behavior, public moments, and the accumulating weight of a story that never quite felt finished. Harry gave up a great deal to make this marriage work. The question that observers are now openly asking is whether that sacrifice ultimately served the marriage, or whether it simply changed the setting in which the same tensions were always going to emerge. That question doesn't have a neat answer yet, but it has a lot of people asking it, loudly, and they're not going away. If this video gave you something to think about, hit like. It genuinely helps more people find this channel. Subscribe if you're new, because royal coverage like this drops regularly and you don't want to be the last to know. Share this with someone who's been following the Harry and Meghan story, because the conversation is just getting started. I'll see you in the next one.